Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for being here with us. I'm Katie Earle. I coordinate our University Express program, and we're joined here with Felicia Beard for another really fabulous presentation, and we're so appreciative of her time. So thank you, Felicia. Quick housekeeping, we are recording, and if all goes as planned, I'll post it on our website maybe sometime next week. If you have any questions or comments for Felicia, she's going through her presentation, feel free to put that in our chat. And I'm also going to activate our Q&A because I just learned if you're on an iPad, sometimes the chat doesn't appear. So hopefully you'll be able to participate with us one way or another, and we look forward to having good discussion at the end of this. We'll just quickly thank our sponsors, which is my Department of Senior Services, Highmark Blue Cross Blue Shield of Western New York, Excelsior Orthopedics, and Wegmans for all their support. And Senior Services is the 858-8526 if you ever need anything. So the star of our show today, Felicia Beard is the Senior Director of Racial Equity Initiatives at the Community Foundation. In this role, she is responsible for developing, supporting, and advancing the Community Foundation's commitment to racial and ethnic equity. She also manages the work of the Greater Buffalo Racial Equity Roundtable, which is a group of more than 35 leaders that we'll learn about today. So Felicia, thank you so much for your time. I will turn it over and the floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me here today. I hope my mom was able to get in. She's the one who was trying to get the link to. Do you see her? Okay, well, she can see the recording, I suppose. Anyway, thank you for having me here today. I am going to spend a little bit of time giving you a high-level overview of the work of the Greater Buffalo Racial Equity Roundtable. There is going to be a moment where I switch out of my PowerPoint to show you a video. It's actually on the front end, so I ask that you would bear with me for that because it's going to be, you know, it's not so easy when you're doing a virtual meeting as opposed to a, as opposed to a in live presentation. So I don't know what this is that's going on with my screen. So I'm going to come out of here for a second. And I'm going to share again. Okay. So the Greater Buffalo Racial Equity Roundtable, everybody sees the PowerPoint presentation, right?
We just have to switch back out of presenter mode. We just swap that and then we should be good to go.
Okay. So the Greater Buffalo Racial Equity Roundtable is an initiative of the Community Foundation for Greater Buffalo. And about 2015, the Community Foundation brought together a number of our community leaders, represented unprecedented cross-sector collaboration, one that we have really never heard of before in our community, which was representative of faith leaders, public institution leaders, nonprofit organization leaders, as well as philanthropy and businesses, who all came together. It's about 32 people who all came together around the idea of advancing racial equity within our community. Our community, as we all have witnessed, unfortunately due to COVID, we had a little bit of a setback, but our community has been going through an economic resurgence. And really the purpose of this group was to make sure that everybody will be included in the economic renaissance that has been occurring. So pretty much the foundation and the reasons, you know, why this is really important, you can see is 50% of the city of Buffalo residents are people of color, and that represents 20% in our overall region. We are known as the third poorest large city in the nation. We are known also as the sixth most segregated city. We have a 90% isolation index. And the isolation index, for those of you who don't know, is a number that comes out of Brown University. And it really tells us really that on any given day, there's a 90% probability that a white person will not have a meaningful interaction with a person of color. That's not, passing them on the street and smiling hello. That's really having a connection, an engaged conversation, or something that would really be meaningful. And so when you step back and you look at that number, that really is quite telling for our community. It also is quite telling for the future, as the future is projected to be minority in the years 2040. So, having no experience in interacting with people of color could potentially set a lot of people back as we continue to move into a global economy. The other condition that really made the work for the Racial Equity Roundtable important, which I mentioned early on, is the economic resurgence that we are experiencing in our community. And then, of course, we are the birthplace of the NAACP via the Niagara movement. This slide basically is just showing you that the ultimate goal, the overarching goal of all the work that you're going to see is to achieve an expanded and inclusive economy in our region. Some of the representatives on the Racial Equity Roundtable, which there are nearly 40, are the Mayor of Buffalo. We also have the President of the Buffalo Urban League. We have the Senior Vice President of the Buffalo Bills. The Erie County District Attorney is a member. The President of our Regional Chamber of Commerce. The Bishop of the Episcopal Diocese, as well as the President of the Western New York Area Labor Federation. Now, as you can see, 40 members are not listed here. If you'd like to have the full detailed list of membership, you can find that at on our website, which is racialequitybuffalo.org. I'm going to stop sharing right now because before I move into the work, I think it's important that you hear from the Racial Equity Roundtable members why this work was important for them. So I'm going to share again, but what I'm going to share with you is a 7-minute video where you can hear them speak directly as to the importance of this work.
And my mother.
Can you hear that?
Yes.
I'll never forget it. I see the street, I see the bus station, and I read these words, coloreds to the back. And my mother snatches my hand, spins me around, and she said, don't read it. But I kept asking her, what does that mean? And eventually she had to explain that to me. It broke my heart.
I always wanted to sit on the front seat and watch the bus driver drive. And every time I got on the bus, I would plop myself down right on the front seat. That would drive my mother crazy because she was always headed to the back of the bus.
And we're stopped at a stoplight. So I asked us, why are we rolling up our windows? It's the summer and it's hot. And she goes, well, we got to be careful because there's black people in this neighborhood and we don't want them coming in and trying to rob us. So that was my first real, in your face, wow.
Everything was segregated. We had the black beach, which was Bayshore, and the white beach, which was Buckrow. And I worked at the white beach, but I could not attend.
I grew up in a neighborhood that was 99.9% African American.
I grew up on the east side of Buffalo, Broadway Fillmore area. When I was 14 and a half, I went to work in a restaurant working with 3 people of color. These people kind of took me under their wings, adopted me, and proceeded to really watch out for me when I was at work. That was the first time I really had the experience of understanding that the issue of race, creed, or color was not as significant as I had grown up believing.
I learned very early on that we didn't consider ourselves white. We were actually taught to be afraid of whites. My accent was very heavy, Mexican accent. I remember sitting in front of a mirror at home practicing words just so that I wouldn't be made fun of.
I was a teenager when my parents bought a house in the Fruit Belt. It was not too long after the Kensington Expressway was put in, where people's houses were being devalued because of the expressway.
My father is a veteran. He was not offered a FHA loan to move to Cheektowaga or Amherst or anywhere else, but he was offered an FHA loan to move on Emsley Street. White people live between Smith and Fillmore, and black people live between Smith and Emsley. There was a big line painted in the street. And on one side of the line it said Africa, and on the other side of the line it said United States of America.
I was one of the first that was bussed out in the 4th grade and going into an all-white neighborhood. Well, I came home and told my mother, I said, you know what? I'm the only black girl in the classroom.
I actually grew up in the Mississippi, in the South. So I grew up in an era of Jim Crow and racial segregation. So my grandmother, who was a committed Christian, was horrified by this, and she started organizing meals of African Americans and white people. And I had this image of people singing together, black hands and white hands being held together. And this, as just a little boy, this made a deep impact on me.
I didn't have any lawyers and doctors in my family to look up to say, I want to be like them. In fact, I remember when I was little, even telling my grandmother, saying, I think when I grow up, I want to be a lawyer. And she patted me on my head and said, you know, that's cute. But it wasn't something that was attainable.
I'm 36 now, just turned 36. I can tell you, when I turned 21, I cried. When I turned 25, I cried. When I turned 30, it was a big, I didn't cry then, but it was a big moment because coming up from where I was, the odds are against me, you know? The odds are against a lot of young black men.
Racial Equity Roundtable is a group of people of various backgrounds that can touch a large number of people.
We've all come together with one common goal in mind.
These people around the table look at each other in the eyes and say, we're here, we're committed, we promise, we must.
And it was such a compelling case revealed in the data. It said that we don't have any other choice but to correct this, and the time is now.
Here we have all this Renaissance, resurgence, new buildings, new things going on, but yet we have in the city of Buffalo 40,000 African Americans living in poverty.
We are leaving talent on the table if we don't bring everybody in to Buffalo's Renaissance.
We don't just want to see new buildings. We want to see neighborhoods that are coming around them and being successful for all people.
There's nothing I'd like to see more than us using this platform of success that we've experienced the last 5 years and really use that as a springboard to embrace diversity and embrace economic opportunity for all people in Buffalo.
The Say Yes initiative really demonstrated to me that we can do this.
Racial equity is the opportunity to pursue dreams, aspirations, talents, unaffected by your racial composition.
We all want the same thing. It doesn't matter where you're from. We all want to be healthy, we want to be happy, we want to be prosperous.
We talk about One Buffalo, let's see if we really are, right? Let's make this one community for everybody.
I think that this is the most important thing that Buffalo has to do.
We need to decide, do we want to be a community known for high concentration of poverty or prosperity that's shared by everyone, everywhere?
Racial equity is the way of the future. It is the key to unlocking the full potential of this community.
We can do it here in Buffalo. We can become a national and international model, transform lives in this community, and through the work that we're doing here, transform lives across the country.
Join the conversation. Join the action.
Join us.
Join us.
Come join us.
Join us.
All right. So as you heard, the roundtable members all ask, join us. So again, I'm glad that I'm able to present this work because this is one of those join us moments. You're joining the conversation. So I will share my screen again to continue on with the presentation, which I have to now find. All right. Do you see the presentation mode or do you see the slide?
I see presenter mode, so we just got to swap it again.
Yeah. Okay. It's flipping on my computer too.
Say.
Okay. So before the Racial Equity Roundtable members launched into this work, so that we were not in the community saying how we feel, what we think, we actually commissioned the University of Buffalo's Regional Institute to do an assessment. What is it, what's it like in our community? And, what would racial equity look like when we close racial equity gaps in specific areas? And so they commissioned a UB, and a report was created and launched in November of 2016, which I will drop in the chat box for all of you who are interested in reading. But what this report does is it makes the economic case for advancing racial equity in our community. It shows in 16 different indicators across 4 different domains, which you see are listed on this PowerPoint slide. But it shows what the economic benefit would be when we close racial equity gaps in these particular areas. And at the back of this particular report, it also gives some estimations of how many billions of dollars would be returned back into our community, how many bank accounts would be established. And ultimately, if we have an economically viable community, you have happier people, happier neighborhoods, everybody's benefiting overall. So I do, highly recommend that, once you get this link, that you take the time to read through this particular report, but this is the foundation of the work of the Racial Equity Roundtable as we make the economic case in our community. What you see before you now is the overall work plan or portfolio of work for the Greater Buffalo Racial Equity Roundtable. These are the particular strategies that I'm going to walk through for you at a high level during our time this morning. And I'm not going to go deep. If you have any specific questions at the end, you can ask me some questions, or if Catherine so decides to bring me back in the future to speak about a particular initiative, that might be better, because there truly has been a lot of work that has been occurring since 2015 to 2021 today. So it takes a lot of time to get through this. So what's important about this work plan is that the overarching goal to achieve an expanded and inclusive economy is really done with 2 huge strategies. One, which you see are the lighter circles at the top, they're kind of a greenish color. Those particular strategies are focused on creating conditions for change. And that really means tilling the soil, right? Educating people, because, we all have the way we've been thinking for however long we've been on this planet. So now we got to go in and dig up and till and educate the community on truth concerning communities of color. The bottom circles, the blue circles, are the specific systems that the Greater Buffalo Racial Equity Roundtable have identified for systems change. It's important to note that this work, this systems change work, is work that is not going to change overnight. We all knew when we began this work that it's going to take time, but it doesn't mean that we can't be effective in the short run with some of the strategies and some of the tactics that we use within these strategies as we continue to move forward. The circle in the center is our policy circle. And what that ultimately is talking about is we call it the little P and the big P. So we also have a strategy with the big P where we're focused on advocating and advancing specific legislation at the local, regional, state, and federal levels. And then the smaller P goes to the different types of policies, practices, and procedures that are being changed within institutions as they too begin to embrace racial equity by creating inclusive workplaces and workforces. Under our creating conditions for change, one of our strategies is narrative change. And what we have done is we have partnered with our local public broadcasting network to create a racial equity news desk, as well as they've hired their first person of color to do in-depth reporting in communities that they normally didn't have that reach into. And there's a number of articles, and just this past summer, not this past summer, but the summer of 2020, they hosted a number of conversations about race. But this overall initiative is truly to tell the true, authentic narrative about communities of color. The reason that's important is because oftentimes people are given an image or view, and without any context for that image or that view, you run away with whatever you have seen over the years. There's implicit bias. There's a number of things that speak to just that image. This particular initiative is designed to go to the root, to tell the full story about why things are as such. I did have a clip within this video, hopefully it'll come up, of one of the news stories that WBFO did back in 2017, I believe it was. It's our favorite, so I'm going to play it, and hopefully you can hear the difference.
There's never a dull moment at the Push Community Center on Grant Street in Buffalo. On a typical day, you'll find dozens of kids in various programs. You'll also find Christian Pata, who works here as the field organizing manager. Although he loves his job, this isn't the path he thought his life would take.
I was going to be the first one to graduate, the first one that left the hood, ready to make it.
He moved here from New York City to attend Erie County Community College, but one day found himself behind bars, saddled with a $25,000 bail, after he says police in Lackawanna found his roommate's drugs.
But I was so in shock. And that's when he said $25,000 bail, and I'm just like, what the hell just happened to my life?
The charges were eventually dismissed, but he was jailed for 2.5 months, waiting for his case to be sorted out. In the meantime, his life at school unraveled.
So I failed every class, and financial aid told me they couldn't give me any more financial aid because you need a 2.5 GPA or more. I tried to speak to the professors. They told me this is not a good enough excuse. So I actually never got my degree, and it just led me to basically failure, like in the sense of education.
Pata's story is shared by thousands. In New York State, there's a daily average of 25,000 people in jails. Here in Erie County, there is about 1,200, and about 2/3 are being detained pre-trial because they haven't posted bail. Now, some of these folks are housed at the Erie County Holding Center. It's located on the Justice Corridor in downtown Buffalo. On each side of Delaware Avenue, extending about 2 blocks, are buildings related to law enforcement. One of them is the City Court building, a concrete high-rise shaped like a blunt fork. That's where legal aid defense attorney Rebecca Town works with people who don't have a lot of money. She says the cash bail system has a domino effect, and it's like being punished before actually being found guilty.
They may have a minimum wage job, a service sector job, and the first day they're a no-call, no-show, they've lost that job. You don't move your car from the side of the street before you go into custody, and then it sits there for a week. It gets towed, and the impound fees add up, and the parking tickets add up.
The Partnership for the Public Good examined this issue. They recently sat in on more than 200 cases, and they found the average bail for misdemeanors in Buffalo is 5 times higher than in New York City. Andrea O'Sullivan is the deputy director for the partnership. She says some people get cash bail not just for misdemeanors and felonies, but for violations.
That's the lowest level criminal charge you can have. We saw it even for things like disorderly conduct. So a neighbor calls and makes a noise complaint about someone living near them, and the police come, arrest that person for it. That's not even a misdemeanor charge. It's a violation, but we did see people get money bail set on them for that.
The partnership's report also highlighted some racial disparities. 54% of whites were released without bail, while 37% of blacks and 32% of Latinos were released without bail. Now this year, Governor Andrew Cuomo proposed eliminating money bail for misdemeanors and nonviolent felonies. Erie County District Attorney John Flynn supports bail reform under certain circumstances. He says some defendants fail to show up for court repeatedly.
If I have an individual who has multiple bench warrants or a history of bench warrants, and he's only charged with a misdemeanor now on a new offense, well, as a DA, I'm going to say to the judge, I get it, it's only a misdemeanor here, but Mr. Smith has a history of not coming to court. We got to put some bail on him.
But his office doesn't actually set the bail. That responsibility falls to the judges. City Court Judge Deborah Givens says there are alternatives to cash bail, like the Released Under Supervision program. She sometimes offers it to those who come into her courtroom. It's a program where defendants are released and monitored through the probation office.
Obviously, the goal is we don't want people languishing over in the holding center, especially, with the things that are happening in jails these days.
Givens says bail isn't a simple issue, and judges take many factors into consideration. But she says hopefully things will become easier when statewide bail reform takes place. For WBFO News, this is Angelica Morrison.
So as you can see the presentation again? Okay, great. So as you can see, the importance of telling the whole story. And of course, a couple years ago, I believe early 2020, bail reform passed, and a lot of people were in an uproar, but they didn't have the whole story as to why bail reform is important. This young person got caught up in a system, and even before being proven guilty, he basically lost his job, his school, etc. So this particular initiative is working to get the full story out, helping to educate people so that policies can be changed and legislation can be changed that would ultimately benefit everyone. Another strategy that we have up under our Creating Conditions for Change is our Racial Equity Impact Analysis training. This particular training is geared toward CEOs in their C-suite, their executives, and this training focuses on 3 things. Participants receive a shared history concerning why communities of color exist the way they do today, and that really leans into intentional federal policy that was drafted. So this training talks a lot about that. It also gives the participants a shared language around racial equity, and it also gives them a shared tool for which any decision maker should stop and use before they would move forward with any particular policy that's going to affect the masses, basically. And we wanted to make sure that this training was not a check the box training, a one and done, and so we created a part 2 where 2 people are given additional training to champion the use of the learning within the institutions that actually participate. And they also create a work plan where they identify specific, like 2 to 3 specific strategies, or not strategies, but policies that they want to work on immediately. As you can see, to date, we've had more than 3,500 leaders in our community actually participate in the training. and that represents over 140 organizations. And you see what Patty Stevens says from Buffalo Prep. And we have a number of testimonials behind this where we've seen businesses actually create positions because they take racial equity and inclusive workplaces seriously. So they created positions focused on making that workplace inclusive. We've seen them use the racial equity lens in their strategic plan development, and a number of other different ways we're actually seeing this be used within our community. Racial healing circles are the only strategy that we have, besides me coming out and having you join the conversation, where individuals can really get a hands-on opportunity in the work that the Racial Equity Roundtable is doing. The racial healing circles are an intercongregational strategy that brings different faith institutions together to have dialogue about race, where I come from, where you come from. And as these diverse groups are sitting together, you find out that, wow, we're really not that much different. Some of the things that you've experienced, so have I, and vice versa. And so when I talked about the 90% isolation index at the beginning of the conversation, this particular strategy helps with creating a safe place to begin to have those meaning, in-depth conversations and dialogues with people that do not look like you. And one of the homework assignments that we give to people who participate in the racial healing circles is within a 30-day period, the person that you were connected with, because it starts off as a full circle, and then there's some exercises where people are intentionally paired up with people that don't look like them, don't have similar upbringing necessarily that you would think on the surface. But we ask that people would reach out to each other and have coffee or, meet somewhere outside of this circle and begin to develop that relationship and get to know each other better. This particular strategy, which began as an intercongregational strategy, now is being used in businesses. The Buffalo Niagara Partnership has used it with their 360 group, as well as some other businesses that have come and asked for this particular strategy. The Diversity and Inclusion Initiative has 4 different pieces to it. This is actually done through the Buffalo Niagara Partnership. There is a Diversity and Inclusion Academy for the businesses that are members of the partnership. There is also a Diversity and Inclusion Symposium that we do every year, and it continues to grow and grow and grow. We are moving into our 4th year I believe it's our 4th year. My numbers could be off. As I'm working from home, I'm losing days and time. But anyway, it continues to grow. Our very first one was with about 200 employers in our community who came together to learn different resources and tools for making their workplaces inclusive. And our most recent one had the attendance of 890 employers within our community that were interested in learning more. So this is something that has shown success, and we're going to continue to do. The other thing that's up under this initiative is a diversity and inclusion peer exchange. So it's a learning community where people in HR positions, vice president positions, sharpen each other, learn about different strategies they're doing, trade secrets, and there's also a facilitator that offers new tools and resources. And then the last piece of this particular initiative is a business self-assessment. So at the end of 2020 last year, in our Western New York community, through this initiative, we launched our first business self-assessment where businesses were to look internally and say, hey, are we an inclusive workplace? And they filled out this survey, we got all this information, and we are using this information to design technical assistance to help those businesses become inclusive. This particular study, if you're interested in, I'll see if I can drop it in the chat box as well, but the study lives on the Buffalo Niagara Partnership's website, and it's available to the public if you're interested. The strategies I went over are the ones that are focused on creating conditions for change. The other strategies that I'm going to go through, again, to the best of my ability at a super high level. I find myself sometimes talking a little too much about these because the work truly is exciting and I want to share. But I'll try to get through each of these, but these particular strategies are the specific systems that we have identified. What's also important to note is that the work of the roundtable began with that group of about 40 leaders, as I mentioned at the beginning, but we are working with over 350 partners in the Western New York area to move this 10-point agenda / work plan forward in our community. One of the smaller tables that has been set is our Business Leaders Task Force. The Business Leaders Task Force is made up of 14 CEOs from major employment organizations within our community who have come together with the focus of growing the wealth and capacity of businesses of color in our region. These corporations have designated their procurement officers to do what they need to do to contract directly, not second tier, third tier, but directly with businesses of color in our community. This has led to policy change within these organizations. This has led to creativity and carving out larger contracts to give smaller pieces to these businesses. And we're excited about this work, and we hope to be able to bring more on it to the community in the near future. And the last thing I would say about these business leaders is that they selected this strategy. We did not dictate what they needed to do. This is what they wanted to do, and they're looking to see, okay, now what's next? We're going to keep doing this, but how else can we be of benefit? Our Reentry Coalition is focused on improving the outcomes for reentering citizens within our community. Through several years of meeting and working together, we have a physical one-stop comprehensive facility where anybody who is leaving the Erie County Holding Center can walk right around the corner to the service link stop and receive comprehensive services that will help them to be successful and not go back through the front door to the holding center. The importance in that is that when we began looking at the ecosystem of reentry in our community, we found that our recidivism rate in our community back in 2018-ish was 82%. Yeah, 82%. So people were coming out, walking around the corner and walking back through the door. Well, now they can come out, walk a little ways around the corner into a facility where they can get help. And we found the top 3 reasons they were, incarcerated in the first place had to do with, number 1, of course, mental health and substance abuse. The other thing that was a big deal was working. A lot of people don't have jobs. And so this facility is going to help them with those different needs and then help them to get employed as well. Our Boys and Young Men of Color Breaking Barriers initiative is focused on helping our young males of color use their voice. We're training them up to be leaders and to be their own advocates for change in their community and issues that relate to them and their families. Our Breaking Barriers youth, as you can see in this picture, they have traveled. Some of them have been requested across the nation to be speakers. Some of them have actually began crafting their own policies to present at the state level. And then one of the most important things or significant things, because this is systems change, because we have a partnership with the City of Buffalo, the Buffalo Public Schools, Say Yes Buffalo, and also a national organization we've been working with called Cities United. This began as, an initiative off to the side, kind of like an after school or Saturday type academy, but it's for in and out of school youth. I want to make that clear. It's not just for in school youth. It is up under Say Yes, but it's for in and out of school youth ages 14 to 21. Even though it began as such, and we do it at the community schools on Saturday, we're working with the Buffalo Public Schools on making this an elective for all incoming freshmen in the high schools, which changes the system. It changes the school system, and it gives our young men a sense of leadership. These young people talk about leaving a legacy. When they began this program, and I was there from the very beginning, sitting in the classroom, they wouldn't talk about legacy. They wouldn't talk about being leaders. They know who they are. And so we're very proud of this initiative and what these young people are doing. Our Juvenile Justice Works initiative is focused on reducing the incidents and contact with the juvenile justice system. It really is juvenile justice reform. We have 4 specific strategies we're working on, all inclusive of community engagement, and also monitoring data to see if our strategies are working. This is focused on implementing restorative justice practices in 5 Buffalo public schools. 2 of those schools are elementary schools, 1 is an alternative, and 2 are high schools. So it's Burgard High School, East High School, Dr. C.R. Drew, Dr. Lydia T. Wright, and School 131, which I can't think of the name of it right now, but that's the alternative school, grades 7 through 12. We are also, that's one strategy. We are also working on a training strategy where we are going to be focused on doing racial equity training throughout the juvenile justice system, which is really important because we have a lot of implicit bias, right? I mean, even thinking back to the radio story I just talked to you about, we all live on the surface with information sometimes, and so that information drives what we think, how we feel, how we interact with others. And we can't have our young people in a system where people don't know who they are, what their barriers are, what's going on in their homes. So that racial equity training is very important. The other piece, or another strategy that we're working on within the juvenile justice piece, is probation. We found that there was a high incidence of disparities in probation in terms of technical violations or violations in general. So what that means is, a kid didn't show up on time, so we're going to violate this kid, and you're going to go to the detention center, as opposed to, why is it that, white kids aren't getting violated as much as the kids of color? And are you listening to why they were late? So there's a whole bunch of pieces behind that. So we have a strategy working with probation. And then the last piece is strengthening community policing. And again, like I said, all of these are inclusive of community engagement and informed by youth. We have youth who are working with us so that we're not doing something without them that will not help them. Hopefully I said that right. The last strategy on that lovely circle diagram that I showed you early on is our youth employment strategy. So we have a whole coalition that is working on creating career pathways for youth ages 16 to 24, which will lead to family sustaining wages. That's a mouthful. But anyway, this particular initiative has 5 pillars. One is we are working on a robust data platform that will tie all of the service providers together that are working on helping youth to get employed, like internships and employment, and making sure that they're all kind of comprehensively case managing the young people. I hate to use case management because that implies there's some issues, and that's not necessarily the case, but they're working together to make sure that the young people are successful. There's also a pillar that's focused on youth engagement. We have youth at the table. They're informing the strategies, they're informing what's coming out of this coalition. We also have youth apprenticeship, which is operated or going to be a part of Say Yes Buffalo. They'll be responsible for that. We also have employer engagement. So we have employers at the table who are being trained in racial equity as well as youth development, because sometimes they have an intern or young person that comes onto a job and, okay, sit here and file, and that's good enough. Or sometimes they're speaking in the presence of a young person, not understanding that the things that they're saying can be offensive and off-putting to that young person. So those employers are being nurtured up and trained as well to be able to really be effective mentors as these young people are coming to their workplaces. And then the last piece, which is a really important and exciting piece for us, is there will be a youth one-stop hub, a facility that SUNY Erie is going to be managing, where young people can come together and they can get coaching, they can get whatever they want, whatever they need, interaction with each other at a one-stop facility that will be welcoming to them. And they will also have a virtual hub so that if they can't get to the facility, or if they need a quick question or whatever, they can also access the information. So at a very high level, oops, I'm going the wrong way. At a very high level, that is the work of the Greater Buffalo Racial Equity Roundtable. I will stop sharing my screen right now and take any questions that you all may have.
All right, Felicia, thank you so much for that presentation. That was wonderful. And I love the video. I thought that was a great starting point. Let's see. The first question I'm seeing is, can you speak a little more about equity versus equality?
Yes. So equality is giving everybody the same thing. Okay. And that doesn't work. Because equity shows us that that does not work. You have to give people what they need based on where they are, right? So a quick example that just popped up into my head is, if we gave everybody a pair of sneakers, right? Because we're all running a race, right? What benefit is it to give a person who's in a wheelchair a pair of sneakers? It's not going to make them run faster. It's not going to make them win the race necessarily. So we have to see, how is that person situated? What do they need so that they can compete and become successful with others? And that's why we're focused on equity.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you. This next question is, are racial healing circles similar to restorative justice? And can you explain restorative justice?
So racial healing circles, you could say that they're similar to restorative justice. However, restorative justice deals with a victim. It also deals with, making that right wrong. And the racial healing circles are really more focused on, I think it's an awareness to some extent of wrongs that are done, but that's not the focus of getting together. For example, there are specific questions that were, I want to say curated. I don't know if that's the right word, but this particular initiative comes from the W.K. Kellogg Foundation. They actually, I don't want to say experimented. They tested and used this, and they, created this model off of the Native American culture where restorative justice practices come from as well. And they designed this, and then they released this particular model and initiative to the nation. And we picked it up within our community. There are racial healing practitioners, and there is, specific questions that are asked. For example, one of the questions is, introduce yourself, right? But while you're introducing yourself, tell me, think on your ancestors. What ancestor or who has been the most influential in who you are today? And so people start talking about their aunts, their uncles, their great grandparents, all these things. And you get to hear, why, who this person is, what makes them who they are, and where they come from. Restorative justice practices is, you wronged me, you hit me, or you stole from me. And now we're going to sit in a circle and talk about that, how it affected me, and how, and you got to feel that and apologize and try to make that wrong right.
That makes a lot of sense. So really about creating that connection and that bond and starting those conversations then.
Right.
Very interesting. Thank you, Felicia.
Welcome.
And we have somebody that wants to get involved in the Racial Equity Roundtable, so I'll give you their information offline. That's exciting. We'll just give it another.
Go ahead.
Nope, I interrupted you. What were you going to say?
So I was going to say the easiest way to get involved is first through the racial healing circles. The other things, what we tell people is that we want to continue to create conditions for change. We want people to be educated. We want people to read. We want people to communicate with each other. So once you read the dividend report, which I promised to drop in the chat box and I haven't yet, but when you read the dividend report, invite a few of your friends over, have them read it as well, and have a conversation around the report, begin to help tell that true narrative as you become more educated, right? Listen to WBFO and their racial equity news desk. Listen to those stories. So that's the quickest, easiest, and best way to get involved with the work of the Racial Equity Roundtable.
Thank you for the information. And if you want to drop that in the chat quickly, we'll just pause here, and that gives us a chance to see if anything else comes through as well. And if you can't find it readily, if you can send it to me after, and I can email it out to everybody. No pressure.
Nope, I have it. Just have to cut it. And it's on our website. So when you click into get the actual report, you'll be on our website. And what I want to tell you is that we also have a resource page that has a number of different readings, documentaries. What else is on there? Links. I think we have some links to some other resources as well. So take your time, go through the pages. Now, the information about the work of the Racial Equity Roundtable is a little outdated. It's not as new as the stuff that I told you today. It's more of, when we began. And because this work has been just really picking up, I haven't had a chance to go back and update it to where we are today.
Great. Well, thank you for the link. It's in the chat, everybody. And somebody's asking, when are the circles? Is there a schedule or anything that we know coming up, Felicia?
So the National Federation for Just Communities is the organization that is doing the circles in our community. So I can put their link in the chat as well. They'd be the best person to tell you what the schedule is and how to connect on that. I think it's nfjc.org.
Cool, thank you.
And that is not it.
there always seems to be more pressure when you're doing things virtually, you know?
Right? Okay. I have it, so give me 1 second and I will drop that in the chat box.
Okay. All right, perfect. And then while you were doing that, we have a comment that came through. Thank you for this presentation. I had no idea all of this work was going on. This is very exciting.
Oh, good. I'm glad I could provide some new information. That's always exciting.
Yay! All right, well, I'm not seeing anything else. So Felicia, thank you so much for your time. Oh, I've got another thank you. And to everyone who's on, please take advantage of the resources and we'll continue to keep advancing for everybody involved. All right.
Thank you all.